The GameCube, let alone the 6th generation as a whole, had no shortage of license-based games. Licensed games always carried that stigma of being awful, rushed, and generic games, but many over time have actually been discovered to be more hidden gems in some ways. After 2 prior episodes covering licensed GameCube games, some solid, some great, and some truly awful, I'm back to cover 10 more games that fit the bill. So, let's start diving into this topic and see what licensed games await. First up is Driven, published and developed by BAM Entertainment. This racing title, based on the 2001 film starring Sylvester Stallone, is kind of an odd one. Not exactly a movie that people raved about, and less so a movie that anyone would have expected a game to come out of. The game has you tackle a story mode in which you switch between playing as Joe Tonto and young upcoming racing star Jimmy Bly. This arcade-style Formula 1 racer has you zipping your way through tracks while trying not to wreck your vehicle too much. What's interesting is that you have 3 lives on the track, so if too much damage is taken, you will use up a life for the event. Additionally, the game has a zoned-in mechanic, in which the cleaner you drive without hitting walls, your racer will focus, which utilizes a blur effect while your top speed increases. I actually found this mechanic pretty unique and does a good job of encouraging you to ensure your driving is as clean as possible. To be fair, this is essential if you want to progress through the story mode, as the game's AI can be pretty brutal. Aside from the story mode, you can also tackle other tournaments and play as other racers as well, while there are numerous others to unlock as well as tracks. While nothing amazing, it's a surprisingly competent racing game with some nice production values in the main menus, a fairly smooth 60 frames per second performance, and a bumpin' techno soundtrack. Although, the story cutscenes' comic book style does look really low budget. Overall, not a bad game, and one that I'd actually revisit to try and complete sometime. Next up is The Ant Bully, published by Midway and developed by A2M. Based on the 2006 animated film of the same name, players take control of Lucas as he is shrunk by the ant colony that he terrorizes and now must learn the ways of the ants and protect them from other critters as well as the exterminator. The Ant Bully in some ways plays like a level-based Zelda game of that generation. I say this loosely though, as the main similarities are the Z targeting style and the lack of a jump button. Tackling missions the ants provide you vary from defeating X number of enemies in a certain time to protecting creatures that are under attack, and it does a pretty decent job of keeping the game fresh. In between missions, you can interact with the ants in the hub area and choose to replay missions as well for higher ranking medals. The game is interesting, but I have to admit, the controls and overall gameplay are pretty janky. Jumping is automated and seems to work at random, and the combat feels incredibly stiff. Even the movement with the Z targeting mechanic just feels rough. I do like that the game tries to incorporate variety throughout, netting you new abilities later on like wall crawling, but ultimately isn't enough to keep you engaged unless you're a die-hard fan of the film. Next up is American Chopper 2 Full Throttle, published by Activision and developed by Create Studios. Now, here is a property I never imagined a game could be made out of, let alone 2 of them. Then again, when Pit My Ride is a game, I guess any reality series back then tried to have a game made out of it. Anyway, American Chopper 1 apparently skipped the GameCube, so here we are with its sequel. American Chopper 2 has players choose from one of the 4 main cast members from the show: Paul Sr., Paul Jr., Mikey, and Vinny. Upon choosing your member, you will have to build your first bike before hitting the road and tackling missions. You can either build the bike from scratch or let the game auto-build the bike if you want to speed up the process. There's a good amount of customization here, letting you paint any little part of the bike as well. You can initiate missions to tackle from within the garage, and then you're off. Each member will have their own set of missions to tackle. For example, Paul Jr. is about fabrication, so his missions lean more on acquiring parts, while Vinny is about drag racing, and you can do that. You can acquire parts throughout the game's overworld during missions as well. Each mission has a ranking system, leaving for some additional replay value here. I'm not going to lie, this is a game that I expected to be absolutely awful. Yet, oddly, I was entertained a bit more than expected. This is far from a good game, but I expected it to be so much worse. Then again, Create Studios made some truly great games on the PS3's PSN service in the next console generation, so it was interesting to see their beginnings through this. Next up is Power Rangers Dino Thunder, published by THQ and developed by Pacific Coast Power and Light. Power Rangers was such an iconic piece of the 90s, and its success led to countless spin-offs. I just recently beat the original game on the SNES, and coming off of that, I was like, I should see how Power Rangers Dino Thunder is on the GameCube. Well, let's just get this out of the way now. This game is not quite the Power Rangers game I would have expected. Imagine a Power Rangers game where you only use the Zords and never the Rangers themselves. Well, that's this game. While the developers of this are known for vehicle-based games like Nuclear Strike 64, Road Rash 64, and then the later MX Superfly on the GameCube, I was holding out hope for something decent here. You control each Ranger's Zords as you complete incredibly basic missions like collecting X number of items, to defeating X number of enemies, to protecting other Zords in escort missions. And while these are typical objective-based missions that we've come to expect in this generation, the actual execution of them is just boring. Each Zord plays unique, which is fine, and the controls are fairly responsive, but again, the problem is just how boring the overall game is. Let alone, the person on the radio is constantly reminding you to not hurt civilians by crushing their cars or damaging buildings. So, yeah. This one is severely disappointing.
Watch it. There may be people inside. Try not to be so careless. We found one of the Tricerabones. Keep looking. There are more to be found. An ice blast goes in your controls. Shake the control stick to break the ice faster.
Next up is Top Gun Combat Zones, published by Titus and developed by Digital Integration. Looking to fly as Maverick, mowing down bogeys while rocking to Danger Zone? Well, sorry, that's not quite here. How about the Top Gun Anthem theme? Nope, that's missing entirely too. However, aside from these starting qualms, don't write this off yet. Top Gun Combat Zones has you tackling 3 different eras of aerial combat with a variety of missions to tackle. The game has you learn the ropes first before really entering the warzone space and lets you acclimate to the controls. Top Gun Combat Zones is actually less of a sim and more of an arcade-style flight combat game. Controls are incredibly easy to grasp and allows for both first-person view and third-person view. The presentation also screams arcade style, between the combo hit meter to the flashing words and the point system for getting a ranking. The GameCube version is also an improvement from its PS2 original with higher visual fidelity and better controls. While Titus is a publisher that sadly tarnished its name heavily after Superman 64 and Carmageddon 64 in the previous console generation, Top Gun Combat Zones is a surprisingly competent arcade-style flight game that is very easy to pick up and play. Now, before I head into the second half of the games covered, I'd like to give a shout out to today's sponsor, the Real Awkward Podcast. My good friend Andy, aka Pac-Man Case, does a podcast alongside his wife Ashley and their friend Amanda as they discuss a variety of pop culture references, like actors and their filmography history, to top grossing films during specific years, to even the history of pants. Well, that was a bit awkward to mention, but I bet you're intrigued now. So if you're interested, check them out on Spotify at Real Awkward Podcast, and I will also leave a link in the description down below so you can check them out. Now, let's finish up the list. Next up is Tom and Jerry War of the Whiskers, published by New Kid Co. and developed by Vis Entertainment. This sequel to the N64's Tom and Jerry Fists of Fury has players duking it out as the cast from the hit cartoon series. This arena brawler, akin to Power Stone, has you punching and kicking your opponents while picking up items to use against your opponents scattered throughout the arena. While the core fighting mechanics are very much identical to its predecessor, the sequel has interactive arenas that keeps things interesting. Sometimes the kitchen arena, for example, will have the floor freeze over, making for slippery combat, while fighting on the beach will have you watching out for the wave riding in that contains sharks. The game itself does lack staying power though, as the campaign mode can be completed really quickly, and even though you need to beat it with various characters to unlock everything, this will still take no time at all. Realistically, it's the game's multiplayer that will give you the more reasonable playtime. The game does a great job of looking like the cartoon series itself, but one thing I truly admired was the attention to detail with the health bars. Depending on the arena you're fighting on, each health bar matches that arena. So in Chow Meow, which is based on the episode where Tom and Jerry are in Naples, Italy, the health bars are actually the Italian flag. I really appreciate details like this, as it's thinking outside the box a bit. Overall, while not the most content-heavy fighter, what's here is a mindless fun time, especially for fans of the series. Next up is Bionicle, published by Electronic Arts and developed by Argonaut. Back in the early 2000s, LEGO came up with a new popular property called Bionicle. On the island of Motunui exist 6 elemental regions, each protected by a Toa. Toas are warriors with elemental powers based on their region. You will take control of all 6 Toas in the quest to stop Makuta from spreading darkness across the land within this action platformer. Each Toa plays very different from each other. When in the snow region, you will snowboard your way down the mountain, while controlling the Toa in the water region allows for swimming underwater. Combat is also handled in a unique fashion. The Toa use certain element abilities and requires elemental energy. You need to time your attacks as the elemental energy depletes with each attack. You can either wait to rebuild the energy, deflect attacks with your energy shield, or absorb the air to replenish it. It actually makes for some strategy within the combat and keeps you from just mashing buttons. I appreciate the variety the game has, but it definitely could have used more polish. For example, this boss fight looks pretty janky and unpolished and plays similarly so. Also, swimming underwater feels incredibly off and questionable design-wise. Despite some gripes here and there, I actually am intrigued to stick with this and finish it to see how I feel once I've completed it. Next up is the follow-up, Bionicle Heroes, published by Eidos Interactive and developed by Traveler's Tales. TT Games had just proven themselves with the LEGO Star Wars 1 and 2 titles prior to this, and it was clear that they had a great passion for creating games within the LEGO license. Unlike LEGO Star Wars though, and unlike the previous Bionicle installment effort, Bionicle Heroes is a third-person, over-the-shoulder action game. Playing as a Mataron, become Toa, you will tackle levels within 6 worlds as you shoot your way through areas, collecting studs as you blast everything and anything in your path. As you progress through levels, you collect masks that allow you to change your abilities and weaponry. Some have you move slower but provide bigger firepower, while others allow you to move faster with more rapid firepower. Additionally, depending on the masks you've acquired, allows you to access areas to discover for secrets to grab or to advance in general. Some masks allow you to build objects, while another may allow you to traverse the water. Should you lose all your health though, you will lose the mask you had equipped, and you have to reacquire it as you progress. The gameplay loop here is very engaging, honestly. It's interesting seeing the aesthetics of the LEGO games here that Traveler's Tales would staple throughout the years to come. I will say, after playing this, I wish they'd tackle more games in this gameplay direction, because what's here is a lot of fun. Next up is Minority Report, Everybody Runs, published by Activision and developed by Treyarch. This is an interesting movie-based game, as the game is loosely based off the film. Mostly that the protagonist, John Anderton, is falsely accused of a future crime and must outrun and outwit the same police force he works for pre-crime. This action shooter / beat 'em up has you run through 40 levels of non-stop action. Anderton can mix up melee combos between punches and kicks, with more unlocking by using the money accrued within the game. You can also grab and throw enemies, but it's the game's ragdoll physics that are notable. I mean, the game has super ragdoll physics that is just downright hilarious. Throughout the levels, you will also be able to utilize non-lethal weapons to neutralize those trying to hunt you down. You can even get a jetpack later on, which is a lot of fun to mess around with. Being from the same team that made the first Spider-Man movie-based game prior, it's neat seeing some similarities with the combat system, just now with destructible environments and glass windows shattering everywhere. I will say, the game lacks the polish of the Spider-Man efforts Treyarch did, but what's here is a solid time. Playing with cheat codes though makes it more of a blast, especially in ragdoll mode. It is odd though that Anderton, played by Tom Cruise in the film, has been changed appearance-wise entirely to match more of the game's voice actor, Clancy Brown, who is actually just an awesome voice actor regardless. Alright, last up is Samurai Jack: Shadow of Aku, published by Sega and developed by A2M. Samurai Jack is a cartoon series that had a heck of a following back in the day, and while I've only seen an episode or two of this back then, I can see why people love it. The game itself is an action-adventure hack and slash in which Jack must stop his nemesis, Aku. Throughout levels, you must rescue villagers and collect relics as you reach the end of each stage. Combat is fairly simple to grasp, wielding your sword and dishing out combos on foes. You can even enter a Zen-like style called Sakai mode, where the screen switches into a more cinematic camera and goes in slow motion for dramatic effect. Additionally, Jack can utilize shurikens and his bow and arrow for ranged attacks, and can also deflect projectiles back at foes. The original voice cast reprised their roles here as well, adding to the authenticity of the game's experience. I'll be honest, the time I put into this so far seems very promising, and I was really engaged in it. If anything, this so far cements the fact that I need to sit down, watch this entire show, complete this game, and even play the latest installment, Samurai Jack: Battle Through Time. I have to say, exploring the vast amount of licensed games through these episodes truly is exciting. There are still so many more to cover, and I plan to continue doing so as time goes on for the channel. While some were not very good, some certainly surprised me, while a few others truly piqued my intrigue for the property it's based on. So, have you played any of these games? Sound off in the comments below, as I'd love to hear your thoughts. Additionally, be sure to check out the other licensed games episodes, which I will leave a link for in the description down below, as well as at the end of this video. I hope you all enjoyed, GCG Nation, and I will catch you all in the next episode.